Welcome to Astrology Alert. Uh,
Thank you.
I'd love to have you on. You were one of the first people that I was on with, ever way back when. So I still have to thank you for that.
Oh,
And
my honor. You
and
are you are so good at what you do.
oh well, thank you. And thing is, I really enjoy working with you also because normally I bring in the astrology, but the other person doesn't have much to say about astrology, but you do, which is really good because you're looking at it all the time, right? And so,
I, I love it. Astrology just has helped me so much just to understand people
mm,
and to be able to deal with people and understand how to work with them in a way that makes them happy so
mm,
that we get the best, what is like, okay, I'm going to be, it's a family member or it's somebody I'm doing a project with. Where's their Venus?
yeah.
What did they want me? Did they want, clear, concise, or did they want more emotional support? I mean, all of these things, it just makes life easier. I understand myself better. I can even over the years I've learned to take the negative sides of my own chart and say, okay, how can I use this to my advantage? I highly recommend everybody to really learn their own chart and then go find someone if you can as good as you
Well, thank you.
to read it to help give insights and what have you. So
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Yeah, it's an amazing language because once you know the cycles you're in, then it helps you to strategize around both how to be around that time and with what is coming up. So you work toward that. So yeah, that's really the best use of it, rather than have it be some kind of faded, map where things will turn out in a certain way. A lot of what happens has a lot to do with how you use the planets as you go toward a certain point. And this applies even to the most difficult planets like Saturn. Because I notice with Saturn, every single time, yeah, it will give me a hard time. But I also notice that I don't usually get anything done in a serious way until Saturn pressures me. It's a strange thing. I'll have a plan of some kind of, okay, I got to do it now. And then it's like you can feel the sacrifice and you feel the fact that you have to focus, but then you see the result. The hard thing about Saturn, I don't know how you've experienced it, but for me, the hard part is that it's very difficult to keep it out of my body. It'll find a way to sneak in there, and then I don't feel as good as normal. As my energy drops, and that part is hard, and I'm still learning. So like I'll go through a transit, make some mistakes around it, and then have to correct for the following, transit. But I have yet to do a difficult transit of Saturn and not have at least a week where I don't feel like myself. So
where is it in your chart?
it's in Sagittarius, conjunct Mars.
Ah,
Yeah,
conjunct. Okay, in
in
is it
in the
in what
tenth,
house? In the
tenth,
10th.
tenth house.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
and
Well, conjunct Mars, yeah, limiting your ability to take action, definitely.
yeah. Well, I mean, it does that. Although the better you get at it, the more it can be where Saturn is like very how would I say this? Like careful and strategic and measured in taking
Mhm.
action. So, like for example, Saturn Mars, even going back decades, it would have me making schedules. Like when I was a runner, for instance, I was very structured around that. Even though the activity was fairly, do whatever, but I had a structure, and then just the notion of doing things over and over, repeating. That's also a Saturn Mars thing. But yeah, for sure, there's a lot to overcome around. Say Mars wants to act, and Saturn says, "Oh no, no, don't do that yet. Be careful," and so forth. But Saturn does better with age, so
Oh,
that's a good thing as well.
definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
And well, I've got Saturn on my ascendant.
You
So,
do, you do. Remember that thing
yeah.
when we were talking that I thought was sort of informative and comedic when I asked you, well, why do you think you called your channel Black and Orange Tarot? And I mean, I know to some it may seem made up, but Gemini is definitely orange, and you have Gemini rising. So the ascendant is like the person's facade or how they present themselves to the world. So not that you're going to wear orange all the time, but it has a colorful quality. By the way, this is what they finally arrived at with Hillary Clinton's chart as a segue here. And I remember that I would see her wearing those pantsuits, really orangey, and there was a suspicion she was Gemini rising, but it wasn't confirmed as yet. Now it turns out that it is Gemini rising. So that's the orange. But in your case, orange and then black is like Saturn is right there on the ascendant, hovering above it, which actually, I remember we talked about this, how when it's hovering above the line, it's actually stronger than when it's below the line, which many people will say is the opposite, but I disagree. Like when you use whole sign, because the ascendant crossed that Saturn, so it stamps the Saturn on your character, so to speak. And then that can slow you down for years in a way, but then as time is passing, you get wiser, stronger, more disciplined, and it starts to work for you. Plus, it's part of that T-square in your chart, so it's a super important planet, because it means it's wired in to everything. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I know that as it's on my ascendant, I know that, two things. The negative side of it is I actually have a really hard time reaching out to people. I'm really reticent. I put some of that down to having a Cancer moon. So with the shell, I keep my shell up.
True.
So because once you get past the shell, it's all gush, so I have to keep that, but I really, even people I should, or I want to, there's this reticence, which it's hard for me to get over. But on the other side, I'm starting doing more, like I'm doing some nonfiction stuff on using color to organize, and going to be making some videos and articles and things about organizing small business, and live streaming every day, and organizing. And it's like, Saturn, hello.
Yeah. No, and by the way, you have a Saturn Mars thing too, because you have a Saturn Mars square. So
yeah,
that's not that different than Saturn Mars conjunction. In some ways, it's a little better because there's more objectivity when you separate the planets. When they're conjunct, in a way, you lose perspective, but it's still a Saturn-Mars connection, and plus your Venus is on the other end. I mean, your Saturn is really loaded, so
yeah.
you've got to get good at your Saturn if you want your life to progress, basically. Yeah, that's the logic.
The thing about T-square is trying to take these three very different things, energies, and it takes a lifetime to get find ways to make the energy work together, and especially since it's that T-square is sitting on my ascendant descendant line.
Yeah.
So you can't avoid it, and as things pass, it sets it off.
That's true. Although I'll tell you though, you've got on a constant basis, the lunar to early mutable. So Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius, and Virgo. The moon goes through there 4 times a month. Not only that, it's going to go through the midpoints, because the midpoints of your Mars Saturn and your Venus Mars, like they'll be kind of similar in that they'll be in the same, I think it's cardinal somewhere around what? Let's see, 2 degrees. So somewhere in the middle of Capricorn, 28, the middle of 17 degrees Capricorn, and somewhere in the middle of Aries. So then you get not just 4, you get 8 points of the month when the moon goes through there. And I notice in my chart, I know my vulnerable points, and it's sometimes, I don't know if the word is mysterious, fated, whatever. I'll notice that I'll maneuver my way through something I do into the discomfort of the whatever it is. And so I look for the periods where I feel really on, so I'm experiencing the high end of something. So for instance, with all this Saturn, if you're getting pressure on those 4 points, or the 8 points that are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 points, then if you're actually just working steadily on something and you're focused, then you've got it. That's the most you can do, because it is going to be dynamic, and that you got to do something to move forward. And it's not a party time, in other words. It's get things done. But the low end can mean you get stopped. You just get, because Saturn Mars is like a paralysis too, where you're just stuck and you have no energy to do something, or you feel like you you're blocked between two options and so forth. So this thing is a continuous self-study around how to get better and better. And the more you do that tour where you say, okay, 8 times, and 8 would be perfect if you could do that, but that's pretty tricky.
Yeah.
Let's just
I'm
say that.
I'm curious when since it's been a couple of years since I moved to Chicago, but uh, I've just had to move my LLC for my small, how I do YouTube, how I do my business, my publishing. Uh, I've had to move my LLC to this state, and I found it interesting that it was 10 years almost to the day since I started my LLC in Wisconsin. And it's just a fluke. But I'm wondering when because I assume you have a business, you have an actual, like, do you have an actual business? Because the date, I'm wondering if did you choose a date to set up your business that would be fortuitous?
Not this time. Like, curiously, I've done that in the past, but this one that I'm doing now since 2020, I just started, and all I do is I'm like a sole proprietor of my own business, and I
Yeah.
declare my taxes as that. But yeah, there is something to the choosing. Sure. I mean, and by the way, that's really interesting. You said so 10, like, was that 2012 in that range?
2013. And
2013.
it was 2013, and it was and for some reason both versions of Book Art Media LLC, which is what the name of it is, are Aries. Like,
Aries? What do you mean, Aries?
they're both of them were set up around April
Oh, I see. I see. I see. I
April
see.
16th, somewhere between the 13th and 16th. I mix numbers in my head sometimes, so it's one of those. So I've got this Aries company that I think helps kind of kick me in the rear end, because the the lack of a better term, thought form of a company. I mean, companies, events, they have their own charts, and the energy of that of thing or event or whatever it is you have synastry with it, and it does affect you and bring out certain parts of you and complement you in certain ways, or hinder you in certain ways if you've chosen badly. And I didn't specifically choose the date, but I find it interesting that in both cases, it's just, I guess I'm somehow feeling comfortable that I need this good Aries kick in the pants to get up and work or something. So I just
Was this so this LLC, was that the 2013? Was that I'm assuming it's connected to what you're doing now. It's just that now
Yeah.
you're in a different state. Same thing? That's what you
Yeah.
started to do? Okay, that's
Yeah.
super interesting. Here's the thing. So, a little more information around the astrology. This I notice happens a lot. Have you heard of lunations? In the progressions. So when you do your progressions, you look at the sun moon cycle, and every 30 years there's a new moon, and when the moon goes new, people shift directions and they start something new. And this one you can take to the bank, because I've looked at my own and it's absolutely true. I mean, in a way that is, before I understood what it was doing and got some perspective, I wasn't paying attention, but then when I noticed, it's huge. So your last new moon happened in September of 2012, which is probably when you were plotting this move, or like that's around the time when you're shifting directions. And so you're on that 30-year cycle that starts there, and then you can track your progress as you see in the lunation cycle, the square, even the half square. Like there was a half square in June of 2016. Then the first square is December 2019, and then now you're about to.
Oh, wow.
Does that fit?
December 2019,
Yeah,
it was square.
that's the square.
That's when my divorce was finalized.
Yeah, that'll fit. Sure, definitely. The other thing too is that here's what's also interesting. You can look at a chart. So your chart is Gemini rising, but you can take your chart and also treat the progressed chart as an actual chart that is vibrating, because I'll often see things in the progressed, even where I transit the progressed. I'll notice, well, that's weird because that's happening in that house, and that feels more like the progressed house. Like, say, Saturn is going through the progressed fifth or something like that, right? So here's the thing. Aries for you is 11th sign in the natal chart, right? Because you have Gemini rising. So Aries is 11. Now, first of all, Aries is going to be very professional on that alone, because Aries is the house of income from career. It's a house of groups and, joining with people, collaborations with people, all of that. And a house of hopes and wishes. It makes a lot of sense that you would do things under Aries. But the other thing is, your progressed chart is such that you're born with Gemini rising, and then when you were 24 years old, your ascendant went into Cancer. And it doesn't reach Leo until you're 60 years old. The whole time is Cancer, right? So that puts Aries in the career house, up in the 10th, the whole time, right? It's your top thing. And the other thing about your chart that is really super interesting is you were born with, this planetoid that shook, well, it tried to, but it didn't really work astrologically, the Eris, right? Eris. Eris is the one that caused Pluto to be thrown out of the astronomy. And when you were born, so Eris was, it was retrograde, but it's due to make its progressed station at age 54. So Eris is in Aries, in that same sign, and you're approaching, because those stations, you can say, well, it's that year, but really you should look at it as 2 years before and 2 years after. That swath has a lot of that energy in there. This, by the way, was one of the things that I felt would get Biden elected, because I looked at his progressions and I thought, this is so odd that he had a Mercury retrograde for like about 17 years, right even through the Obama years, Mercury was retrograde, and it was going direct right around when he was trying to become president, and Mercury rules his 10th. So I thought, wait a second, this looks really good. And then I noticed Saturn and Uranus making progress stations too. So it looked to me like a really big thing. So yours, Eris goes direct, like you're kind of almost there, but age 54 is the most direct. And Eris is in the 10th of the progress chart, 11th of the natal chart. I mean, they're both pretty powerful that way. And it's the notion of, the female warrioress. It's the idea of female power projected onto the world, and especially advocating for the strengths of women. This has been like how, to me, if you want to be a little more optimistic when it comes to people like Trump, because it's hard to be optimistic when you see a criminal clown like this, wreaking havoc everywhere he goes. But inadvertently, he's really helping women, because they're reacting to him and getting themselves into more and more power, which is really, if you think about it, that's what the universe is trying to do. It needs idiots like Trump in a way, because without that, it's harder to make progress. I know that sounds a little bit like totally Pollyanna, right?
It's true.
Yeah, exactly. So some really interesting things happening in your chart. Let's say that, right? Oh, and by the way, the next thing would be to say that then you look at the lunation and the full moon is 2026. So concurrent with the Eris reaching its station, your moon is full. That's the fruition. That's when things are really full based on the 2012 start, right? You reach that high point, but really you're already there in the sense that you really should look at a swath of about like 3 signs. So it's going to be in Taurus, Scorpio, but by the time the moon is in say Libra, so Libra, Scorpio, Sag, which for you will be, right now your moon is, am I reading this right? Hold on, no, that's wrong. Your sun is in Capricorn, your progressed sun.
Yes.
So when the moon enters Gemini, so Gemini, Cancer, and Leo, those 3, and so the moon will enter Gemini at the end of this year, in December. So then from there, for about 7 years, right, that is Well, I'll explain it this way. That's when Obama was president in his chart. So that's when things are are
Well,
bright. I know.
good, good. It's not, hey, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean
any,
that's the thing. Like with charts, when you know that and you work in that direction and you align yourself with the cycles, that's the I think the best way to use them, in my opinion.
yeah.
So now turning a bit to the public situation, what's been on your mind around what's really strong with people that you're looking at that you really feel, something is moving in a certain direction?
You mean astrologically?
Well, or no,
Or
any
just
way at all.
in general?
Like any way that you've looked at where you think. By the way, backtracking again, something else. You recall you and I had a talk a long time ago now. I mean, at least more than a year, I think, when I think Cy Vance had quit, and there was all this concern because Alvin Bragg was coming in and nothing was going to happen. And we talked about a woman at length. We said all kinds of things about how she would be going, helpful in bringing down Trump. I think she was part of what happened here. It's just that she worked in the background. I think she was probably helping Bragg, wrap his head around it, because for the longest time, he wasn't doing anything. And the next thing you know, he took it up, and he was really the first to indict him, right? So I
Wasn't
think
that a great day?
I know
Oh,
it was a
wasn't
great
that a
day.
great
I
day?
know exactly. For a while, I thought, oh, I talked to her about this with this woman, and nothing came of that, and all that analysis. But I think it
Yeah.
had an effect. Something in the
Yes. Well,
background.
also, I do believe the E. Jean Carroll situation has had a much bigger effect that's not going to hit until election, until it becomes clear what the women voters of the country
Yes.
really think. Because they
Yeah.
can say a lot of things, and sometimes they they don't, they're busy and they don't say things out loud. But when they go in to vote, they
Oh,
vote a
yeah.
certain way, even
For
if they're
sure.
saying otherwise. It's like, oh yeah, honey, I'm going along with what you say. Yeah, whatever, I'm busy. um
For
but
sure.
I really, it feels very much like this E. Jean Carroll situation is, and the fact that he won't let it go. He won't let it go, and it looks like she's talking about she's taking him back to court. It's going to be, there's going to be like a conveyor belt of whatever money he has left going from him into her bank, because he just keeps running his mouth. And there's no way to like, oh, benefit of the doubt, oh, it was just a misunderstanding. No, and he won't let it go.
No.
Did you see the little video he put out yesterday, was it, where he's a drummer, and there were the heads of all these different women he doesn't like as he's drumming on their heads? And it's like, you were just legally held accountable for abuse of women.
It's remarkable. I mean, I think that I was just telling someone today that one of the things that may come out of this era is something that is so obvious but hasn't really, taken root yet, which is that when you say something publicly on video, on Twitter, that is a statement that can be used in court against you because you said it. I mean, Trump seems to think that if he says, I'm going to rob a bank, then he's not liable for what he said. But he keeps saying it. And I think some of that is going to show up in court, and people will learn to not open their mouths. And yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, it's one of the things, too, by the way, that I don't know if you saw that tape that came out in the deposition. I was watching,
Oh
and
yeah.
all of a sudden I see the date and the time. So I ran the chart, and you can see why Trump did what he did, because the big planets are all really harsh: Neptune square, Pluto opposition, Eris square. But the moon was smooth, and there was another one, I forget now what it was. There were two that were really smooth. So he was careless. He basically felt like himself, and he thought, I'll just say what I feel. So this has happened for a million years, and women, blah, blah, blah. I thought, oh my God, bad idea. That's probably what part of the reason why the jury took 3 hours to
Right.
convict him, because they realized, how obvious it was. And I agree with you in that alone on the Eris, because Eris is a glacially slow planet. It's in the part of the orbit where it takes forever, and then it catches up when, like later in the century, it'll make up for all this super slow speed. So people have Eris and Aries between 1920 and 2050. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So his whole life, it's traveled from 6 degrees to 25 degrees. But when you've been doing what he's been doing with Eris, it's going to sit there for the next 10, 12 years, squaring his Venus. That is lethal. This guy is
Yeah,
never going to see the end of courts with women running him around. Not to mention, by the way, that look around and they're all women judges, probably women investigators, women prosecutors. I mean, it's super ironic when you think. I mean, what people say, well, we haven't progressed at all. I don't know about that. I mean, if you go back to the Civil War, what would the odds be that you would see an African American woman taking down a white multimillionaire or billionaire? Pretty low. But that's what's happening.
exactly.
Yeah. So
It
good
is
luck to him.
glorious.
Yeah,
It's glorious.
I know. I know. It's so amazing. Between him and Giuliani, I mean, we can cover like all the corruption. Yeah, I know. All the foul energy of the universe. He's another one. I don't know if you've looked at his chart,
Oh,
but it's
not recently. I haven't. He's so gross. Oh, I was going to ask you. It looks like Fonnie Willis she's asking for a lot of extra security and
in August.
yeah, in August, and for a lot of the other court stuff to not happen in that courthouse in around August. And I'm wondering if you've seen something there that it's
Yeah,
like,
well, I actually said, I don't know, I forget when it might have been January, February. I don't know who was asking me, but I mentioned on some talk that August was the way I put it was that's the end for Trump. Because, and the way I said it, and I'll tell you what, and I'm going to share this in the screen because I talked about
please.
it in my recent class here. So let me see if I can bring this up. Okay, so I'll share the screen and I'll show you what I mean. This one. So you should see,
Oh, there we go.
okay, so here's what's happening, right? So Trump, you can look at, this is looking at the progress chart as a chart of the flow in a person's life, where they're headed, what's happening to them as they're evolving. And like I was saying, it can really reflect the person's life, sometimes even better than the natal chart, right? So here is his progress chart, which I think was the peak of his life, August of 2015, that first debate that he does, and he's suddenly projected onto the national stage beyond anything he's ever had before. And what do you see? Progressed ascendant, exactly conjunct progressed Jupiter. So he's
Almost
right
down
in
to the
Jupiter.
minute. Almost down to the minute.
Almost to the minute.
conjunct.
And so that period of time, he's just on top of the world. Separately, you see that the progressed sun is almost on his ascendant too. So that happens in 2016. So that's part of what got him elected. Progressed sun crossing
Oh,
the
wow.
natal ascendant, right? But then we go a little forward, and here he gets, I think this is when he gets inaugurated. Yeah, January 21st,
Ugh.
2017. And what,
I'm sorry. The pictures in the middle. I understand you need them, but they're giving me the heebie-jeebies. Okay,
well,
but sorry.
no,
Please go
there's
ahead.
no, there's a reason why I put these pictures. You'll see, because
Okay.
for now we see him smiling, right? Here he's neutral.
Okay.
Here he's smiling. Okay, so he's happy because
Okay.
he got inaugurated, and you
Yes.
can see that the progressed ascendant is still pretty near the Jupiter. It's still close enough to have a strong
Mhm.
effect, but it's already starting to pull away, and the moon is elevated at the zenith. That's his election at that moment in time. The sun already had gotten into Virgo by then, but during 2016, it was right on his ascendant. So this explains this chart. Now we move forward. Now we're going to move a lot forward. I could have put other charts on here, like for example, in 2019, this you'll find funny. 2019, almost concurrent with when he tried to extort Ukraine, that was his new moon, his 30-year new moon. And things started to go down badly for him. From that point forward, he got impeached. He got impeached for the first time. Then the pandemic came. I mean, it just all turned into a mess for him. And that's what he's writing from that particular point. That's like the rest of his life on that new moon, right? So,
Good.
but now here is, this one is 2022, this is, I know, that's not quite the same
Good.
picture, right? So this is where in 2022, by now, the progressed ascendant is very late in Libra, right? 29, 22. This is at the time of the deposition. So the moon was at 14 degrees Libra. We move it forward a little bit more, and we go to this one where it's almost at the end in May of this month, May 15th, 29:48. Okay, so now here, that's August 15th. The ascendant switches to Scorpio. So then what happens is, all of a sudden, these here and these planets have been rising for years, years and years and years and years. In August, they all go to the 12th house. I'll let you take it from there and tell everybody what the 12th, what that's likely to do.
The 12th house is it's really the house of institutions, and it can be prisons, and it can
Correct.
be
Correct.
It's the house of it's it's ruled by this Pisces. And if you think about the age we've been in, which you could say is very Christian heavy, and the symbol of Christianity being the fish and that sort of thing with Pisces. What did the Catholic Church, what was it? It was an institution. It turned into the Vatican, and that's the side of Pisces where it's not it's not like an Aquarius kind of spirituality. It's much more institutionalized. So this hospitals, prisons, 12th house is a hidden house.
It's a hidden house, and the thing is, in the context of a criminally minded clown like this man is, everything he does always has the signature of some crime he's trying to commit. And if people think we're exaggerating, ask yourself how it's possible that this complete imbecile has now worked himself into the possibility that he'll face serious problems over those records, which were not even a factor prior to leaving the White House. He's always looking for a way to break some rule, and up to now it's worked. But the thing is, think about this, right? So he's had Libra rising since the 80s, because this takes forever. These ascendants don't. So all this time, if you look at his natal chart over here, the whole time with Libra rising, that's his talking, messaging. He's putting things out. That's what he does. He's always creating a story and repeating it. That's the magic of Trump. But now, by progression, that which has been helping him, and so forth, goes to the 12th. So that suggests that all that energy goes into the 12th, among other things, is karmic accountability. If someone goes to prison, it's because they've done crimes, so they get sequestered, where, say, a person that is sequestered spiritually might go to a monastery or do a lot of retreats or do a lot of that. That's on the high side. There is no high side with Trump. It's all low end. It's all corruption. So now the 12th becomes that. Scorpio, too, in his chart is the 4th. The 4th is typically the place of the grave. It's where things end, right? You could call it a new beginning, but it's not a good new beginning, because the chart goes from Venus rulership to Mars rulership. Mars squares is midheaven, bad situation. And when you start to hear Fonnie Willis saying, hey, clear the decks for August, you kind of think, this is looking pretty grim. Because if that happens, and then God help him if Jack Smith pulls he does the same thing around the same time, which is probably what it'll be, based on the way this chart is. So
plus, Scorpio is the natural detectives of the zodiac, and the Pluto energy going in and not only looking under every rock, but also digging up everything up into the air, so into the sun, so that we can see it and deal with it. So there's all kinds of stuff that's suddenly going to go to the surface. So I can't wait. This is going to be awesome.
yeah, no, it's that's kind of on tap, and it's hard to when I said earlier that new moon cycles are really important. They definitely reflect something. The other thing you would add to that would be ascendant changes, because they also take almost forever. Like you'll have an ascendant point, and then, like in my case, I had one that lasted, I think, 21 years before it switched signs. So you spend a lot of time in that sign. And the one I'm in now, I think, will last somewhere around the same 25 years. I mean, they're anywhere between 20 and 35 years. So it's a big, big change of life. And in this particular case, you know, if you had all these planets, for example, in, let's say that they were all in Scorpio, then Libra changing to Scorpio would actually be a plus, because then you would highlight all those planets. But in his case, the change is quite negative, as I see it. So.
Yeah. And for people who are looking at their own progressions, or getting a progress chart, it's there's some people may not know that it's based on this idea of take the chart you were born with and then advance it roughly a degree per day, and that equals a year in your life.
Okay, I think you're calling that is more solar arcs. Like, okay, so
Okay.
Well, no, it is true for the sun. Like the sun does about a degree a day, right? So
Oh yeah, the others move differently.
The others move different, right?
Solar
So
arcs, it's one all around.
they're all going
Okay,
one by
varies.
one.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
And you know, this is where some astrologers disagree about thinking that solar arc gives you better information. I've never felt that way. I've always felt that I get a lot more symbolic actual. I mean, it's totally real. Around the progressed, like even including, remember I was saying how you get a progressed chart, and then you get these strange patterns where, for example, Saturn will be in the natal 9th or 10th, but it's the progressed 7th of that person, and they're experiencing a relationship issue. And you can't kind of find it until you realize, oh yeah, it's on the progressed progressed chart.
I find that too. I got confused though, because I've gotten lazy with the computers.
Oh,
where
really?
I don't think about, it's like, oh, that's right, one of them is 1 degree each and the other varies. And I have to wonder if some of the things that we do or used to do are changing a little bit because we have such access to creating a chart, creating another chart, and so solar arcs charts would be easier to just look at and go
True.
plus 30 plus 30
Yeah,
plus 30
true.
plus 30.
Yeah.
Whereas a progress chart, there's a little more finessing.
Yeah.
So I always wonder about that, how, you know, I've always really liked Nicholas Culpeper back in the 1600s, who was a gadfly, but he was using medical astrology back in the day. And I just I wonder how much differently astrology would have worked if they could have made charts quickly, easily. They had access to people knowing what time they were born. It's really there's so much that's changed with computers, but I think in astrology this will be seen as a sea change as well. I just a random thought. Just wanted to
No, that's a great comment. I recently said to someone that I can't even imagine what those poor 1600, you know, Middle Ages astrologers were going through, because I mean, even when I used to do it by hand, it took a lot of work. I remember doing, I was so into it that I developed what I thought were these unusual, you know, techniques, and that involved a lot of listing of lots of columns. I remember this thing that I did where I had every degree in my chart, every single point that had any connection to anything. And it took me, I don't know, a week of work. And now the program in Solar Fire, you just touch a button and it just throws you the whole thing. And the thing is, let's face it, you get a lot more done more quickly, because there's no way, if I'm doing, for example, a person's natal, their progressions, their lunations, their harmonics, I still have to spend 10, 15 minutes, even with all this computing, to create a PowerPoint file and get it all orderly, because the program doesn't do everything perfectly. I mean, it sort of does it, but you can't display it properly. But can you imagine doing that by hand? Or like if someone said to me, what age would you want to be born in to do astrology? It would not be the Middle Ages. No, because that's
really
no.
And outer planets. What are outer
Yeah,
planets?
they didn't even know. Right, exactly. exactly. Yeah, that part puzzles me around Vedic, where Vedic astrologers often won't use the outer planets. And sorry, but there are things that, like for example, the Princess Diana case. If you don't have the outer planets, particularly Uranus, to show you what happened, then you have to make it up. You have to say it's something else, which is not nearly as relevant. And you see it there, both in her chart and in Prince Charles's, who was the ex by then, sort of. They were still married, but you see it really clearly. The Uranus, which is the sudden car accident, the suddenness of it, the unexpected nature of it, all those Uranian keywords, and it's right there, precisely conjunct, when it happened. So
exactly.
yeah.
And for example, all this talk of boomers, Gen Z, millennials, all of this, and I'm to kind of run a flag on my flagpole to say, hey, that isn't what this is, and it's just confusing people, and it's weird, the timings of the length of each of these supposedly. No, this is Pluto in Libra, Pluto in Leo, Pluto in Virgo, Pluto in
Yes.
Pluto in Scorpio. Welcome to
Mm-hmm.
the 80s and the shoulder pads, the big, tough, sharp, power, greed is good, welcome to, and this lasts since 2008. Welcome to Pluto in Capricorn.
Yeah. No,
And
100%.
this era that we're in is absolutely described by Capricorn. Even when I went to buy, a few years ago, when I moved in and I needed to buy sheets for the bed, I good luck finding sheets that weren't gray. It was all gray, and it's like, Capricorn, here we go.
Yeah. True. 100%. The people in one thing. I mean, this is a minor. It's not obviously the only thing, but it's just an observation that the people born between 84 and 95, because Pluto was in Scorpio for a pretty brief period. That's another example of an orbit that gets made up in later signs, because in that part of the orbit is flying and then it goes slow. So Pluto in Scorpio, partly was the AIDS pandemic, but the thing that is really striking is all those people that are putting tattoos on their bodies are Pluto and Scorpio people. They've got this thing. Well, I'm going to, and I remember this friend of mine, I told him about the Sri Yantra, which is this, you probably have come across it, this really interesting mandala that is used in the East. It has like four corners and then you have a lot of triangles inside, which is the idea of prosperity and so on. It's a very famous yantra. They're called yantras or mandalas. And he heard about it and he went and he tattooed it on his arm. And I said, well, why did you do that? After I told him, he says, well, that's all right. But, you don't do that because you just keep it out, keep it outside or meditate on it, but you don't have to put it on your body. That's the Pluto and Scorpio approach.
Nothing by halves. and to underneath the surface.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And fixed.
Yeah,
So,
fixed.
yes.
Well, and the kind of especially with Scorpio, you get a bit of that gothic, dark, like Dungeons and Dragons. It's the death sign, so you can start projecting all kinds of things, tales from the crypt type thing on different levels, and so that's why. But to me, tattoos have a Scorpio connection. The idea of that. Yeah, it's art, but
Yeah, that actually reminds me. I wanted to ask you about Pluto but I was going through a book on how the outer planets affect like the entertainment industry and kind of what we're doing culturally and this sort of thing. And someone was saying that they were surprised how much, when it came to things that were considered gothic, which you would think would be absolutely Scorpio, said it comes to fruition in Sagittarius. What is it about Sagittarius that, you had vampires kind of be a big thing up through the 80s and the early 90s. But once you hit the second half of the 90s, it just kind of goes. And I was just thinking about that. I was like, is it just because it takes stuff that's there and expands it? Or
Yeah, well,
so
I mean,
it's leftover Scorpio, or
well, if you
is there
think about
something
it,
about?
if you think about it though, so Scorpio is the pure impulse of that, and you would say if Pluto goes through Scorpio, you get all these people that are all of a sudden they're in the basement. They're like looking at the dark part of the. But then that's the impulse, and then Pluto is still Pluto wherever it goes. So if you put it in Sagittarius, that's the sign of publishing. So you want to get it out there, you want to disseminate it, you want to make it known, and you're bringing what was already building, and now it becomes public books, films, videos. So separately, Pluto in Sagittarius was also the era of international terrorism because Pluto is a terrorist, and Sagittarius is basically countries, foreign countries, the idea of what was going on with Al Qaeda. That whole thing with 9/11 was the Saturn Pluto opposition right across the US ascendant. Remember, you and I talked about this, how the Sibley chart, if you had doubts
Travel.
about the Sibley chart, then that was pretty obvious, right? The two of them
Yeah,
opposing across the ascendant. So that would be
absolutely.
my explanation for that, for the Pluto and Sag, late
Perfect,
90s.
perfect, perfect sense. And I've been thinking about that because I had most of the I don't do a lot of extra tarot decks, and usually ones that are related to like TV shows or something. I'm just like, eh. But I got to tell you, the Buffy the Vampire Tarot deck is really good,
Really?
surprisingly good. And so I was thinking about that, and it reminded me that person talking about, because this was the second half of the 90s was really this era when this was the big thing,
Huh.
and that makes sense. Publishing, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that's the thing. Many times with signs, if you go to the most obvious meaning of a sign, it makes it clear. Like, for example, sometimes you mentioned Pluto and Leo, and you'll see Pluto and Leo in somebody's, I don't know, the 11th house, or maybe the third, or some house not connected to the fifth, because the fifth is the Leo house, the natural house. But then the topic they bring in, because it's Pluto and Leo, Pluto will square something and they're talking about a child, or they're talking about something to do with that, because it's the Leo aspect of that. Of course, another person could say, no, my problem has to do with a casino in Vegas, because that's also Leo. I know you can't cover everything, but there's a possibility that the raw meaning of it comes through, even though it's not involving the house itself, right? Because the sign can draw it in. And Sagittarius and publishing for sure. Just like travel, Sagittarius is also all that Star Trek stuff where they're out in outer space, traveling everywhere. That kind of
Sorry,
thing.
I love Star Trek.
You like that too?
Oh, yeah. If you wouldn't mind me picking your brain for one other question, I've been trying to also thinking about the connection between Pluto moving into Cancer just as World War One erupted, and what it is about how you get Cancer and a world war in.
It's that axis, like the Capricorn Cancer axis, if you think about it. Capricorn is government, and Cancer is the polarity, so it's the homeland, for example. Like the whole thing with Hitler was the homeland had been violated in the First World War, and Germany was out for revenge, takes it into the 30s, and he began to get into a lot of trouble as Pluto was leaving Cancer. Once Pluto entered Leo, Neptune also got out of Virgo, which was really helping him because he was a Taurus, so it was trining and all that, and then it went into Libra. It was a disaster, but it took years. I mean, if you watch those clips of the Second World War, those videos, you see the train wreck coming. The Cassandra crossing. I mean, it's moving to a disaster. But for a while, he's ascendant. He's doing really well, and then it starts to go the other way. So something that you would think could take a year took more like 3, 4, 5 years. But during Pluto in Cancer, the whole world in a way went nuts. It became this thing about, the fascists, like in Japan wanted to rule the world. Russia was first defending, then they wanted to conquer. It was a world war. And now in Capricorn, we're experiencing the same problem, because if you notice, since 2008, slowly started to build with a peak, interestingly, like when Trump came in, there was Bolsonaro, there were all these, Boris, what's his name in the UK? They were all,
Johnson.
Boris Johnson, yeah. So that was the middle of Pluto, the Pluto in Capricorn, which kind of makes sense when a planet is right inside the sign at the center. That's the peak of the whatever it is. But now it's exiting and going the other way. And to me, Aquarius is not a good sign for fascistic. It doesn't work well for that. That's one of the reasons why I'm optimistic about eventually this thing cooling off and all these white supremacists and Nazis and these crazy people should fade into the background again, and they'll emerge at some other point years and years from now because it's almost part of the cycle. That's the best explanation I have to the.
Oh no, that's good. That's good. No, I was trying to think it through, or I've been trying to think it through for a while. I was only drawn to in thinking about it, Pluto entering Cancer, which is the sign of Big Mom, and Capricorn being the sign of Big Dad. Well, with Big Mom and Mother Knows Best, and but I like your homeland. That makes a lot of sense.
Well,
house, home,
and it's the polarity. You always what I know
polarity.
with astrology is always keep the other side in mind because signs are working with their opposite all the time, and you could even argue that a person that is a sign is trying to incarnate the other side as well to balance themselves, right? So like Capricorn tends to be detached and ultra practical, and Cancer is a feeling sign. So it's good for Capricorn to tap into their feelings more and for a Cancer to get more practical because a Cancer will overfeel it, like your moon in Cancer that way. It is good though for picking up people's feelings, for sensing things through feeling, but then it can get too emotional and also too sentimental. Like Cancer likes to hang on to things, collect things, and Capricorn says, just get rid of it. So you need a kind of a balance, let's say, right?
Yeah.
To bring it about.
And the other thing about the World War I thing with Cancer is the devastation of homes because of home life because before that, because the warfare had advanced so much, but medicine hadn't.
Yes, that's
by
true.
World War I.
That's true.
It used to be that the men would leave home and go off to war, and they'd come back, and if they came back at all, it was a whole different kind of ball game. But now, it's like Pluto entered the sign of home,
yes,
and said, "Oh, you think this is going to be some grand thing? No." And wow, did it devastate home lives?
Yeah, no, very true, very true. I mean, it brought in good things too, because Pluto and Cancer. That's when it was discovered too. That's when vaccines were discovered, which lately it's been a form of madness with some of these MAGA people. But vaccines are the idea of introducing a small amount of poison, Pluto, to stimulate the system to produce the antidote. That's brilliant, and so also Freudian.
It's not all bad.
Yeah, no. I mean, sure, even nuclear power, which came online then, is devastatingly bad. But nuclear power is energy. If you can harness it, it can solve problems. So there are a lot of good things about it. But it's a period of a lot of advancement and then a lot of consequent instability. And you could even argue that now we're facing the opposite of that because that Pluto was discovered in 1930, I think, and we're at the opposite point of that. That also happens a lot in astrology. That something happens and then when a planet gets to the other end, you see the results of that as well. So I'm going to have to stop here because I have to go to the next thing. But can we do this again soon? Because there's a lot to catch up on.
This is great.
Maybe I can visit you on your
you
channel.
are welcome any day, anytime.
All right. Excellent. It was great. I look forward to the next one.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.